Russell Clay here to review some DraftKings defenses for Week 10. As always, if you like what we're doing here at Daily Fantasy Cafe, give us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to read this article, it's on the site live as of last night, so definitely go and check that out if you want to get some words in. Obviously, it's an interesting week at defense, but there's some interesting sort of storylines to follow here. I mean, as the season goes along, we have to adjust, and simply put, the Vikings defense hasn't been that great the last 2 weeks. And I wasn't one to believe that against the Lions, and I paid for it. So at this point, I think we have to adjust. I think we have to, view their early season for what it was, which was dominant, and then realize maybe this last stretch is due to, a few injuries in their secondary. I mean, Detroit at home, it was really bizarre. I know it took till overtime to get that 22 points, but, Detroit had no problem moving the ball on him. I think that's something to be cautious of moving forward. So while it is Washington and Kirk Cousins has been, mistake prone in the previous weeks, I don't think that's something we can necessarily trust for the Vikings. So I think they're a fade this week. I want to see what's going on, and maybe that they get their groove back like Stella. Chiefs are my top, value of the week, even though they're not cheap. 3,500 against Carolina. I think you're going to get really low ownership here against a Carolina offense that has some really good players, but overall has kind of disappointed this year. A little of that Super Bowl hangover, just a little regression off of, what they were last year. Cam Newton's obviously still a tremendous talent and can rip anybody apart at home. But I just like what I'm seeing from this Kansas City defense, even without, their top pass rusher still. So I think they're going to be looking to get him back this week. D Ford is a guy that, needs to be handled now. He's a monster. He's been getting sacks pretty much every week. Had a few multi-sack games in there. I think he's a problem on the outside there for offensive lines now. So I think that's something you need to take into account. So I think they're an interesting play at 3,500. The Texans, I think we're all willing to take a gamble on, Blake Bortles making mistakes at this point. Obviously, you can see that the Texans haven't been all that great of late, but they still have some nice players up front. The new offensive coordinator has got the ball moving in Jacksonville, but overall, I think the Texans are a fine play. At 3,800, that's fine with me. Cardinals are the top cash game option. I don't think this is really debatable. They just have so much talent on their defense, and even with a few mediocre performances the last 2 weeks, they've been playing some tough defense or some tough offenses, especially Carolina at home, Seattle. Not the great offense with Russell Wilson banged up, but certainly not a pushover either. San Francisco, though, is a pushover. Colin Kaepernick coming off a big game against the Saints. Not really something I'm taking into account. I think you fire away with the Cardinals and cash games here and don't really worry about it. As far as this midsection, another team is the Broncos. What was once a dominant defense, they didn't really look that great, and they didn't look that great against San Diego either. I know they only gave up 13 points, but Melvin Gordon ran all over them. I think that's something to be cautious of going forward. And with this New Orleans team in the Dome, I think the Broncos, for the first time in, a year and a half, are kind of an easy fade here. Certainly they can take advantage of some of the things Drew Brees does in terms of volume of passes. They can certainly force him into a few mistakes. But unless that's going for a pick six, I'm not confident they're going to hold them under 20. especially under 17, and that really takes away all the yardage or all the point bonuses, besides sacks and turnovers. So I think they're a fade. Unless you're trying to be weird in a tournament, I don't see much need to go that route this week. Now we move back 2,900 to the Rams. They haven't been great this year, but as you can see last week, put up a pretty good score against the Carolina offense. 5 sacks. Aaron Donald is a monster. Robert Quinn's a monster. They obviously had this stretch here against Arizona, Tampa, and Seattle. Against this Jets team with who knows who's starting at quarterback, whether it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, Bryce Petty, Christian Hackenberg, bringing back Vinny Testaverde. Doesn't really matter. Too much chaos going on there. I think the Rams are an interesting pick six candidate, and they always have Tavon lurking there. Hasn't had that punt return touchdown yet this year. I think we're gonna see that at some point this year. So 2,900, I think the upside's certainly there. With the mistake-prone Jets. Moving down, the Bears are a team that have been really good the last 3 weeks, actually. Leonard Floyd really coming together. They've sort of had that high floor since week 4 with those sacks. At least 2 sacks in every game. Obviously, you see those 2 5-sack games against Indianapolis and Minnesota. Tampa Bay does not have a good offensive line, as you saw, in that Rams player card. The Rams had, one of their best games against Tampa. 2 sacks, an interception, a defensive touchdown. I just think this is an interesting matchup, even on the road for the Bears. I really think they can do some damage here. Look what they did to the Packers a few weeks ago. I mean, you talk about that defensive touchdown, but they were getting pressure. I mean, Leonard Floyd is the real deal out of Georgia. Their top rookie pick this year. He's really coming through for them. With Jay Cutler back, I mean, I don't necessarily think that's going to sustain itself long term, but against this Buccaneers team, the Bears might be able to control the pace. So I kind of like this as a sneaky GPP play. They've been playing well of late. The rest here, I know our optimizer said in the Yahoo, if you're at $10, so basically the 2,200 here. If you wanted to take a gamble on that with Trevor Siemian, sure, but I don't necessarily think I'm gonna go for that. I think I'm off. I think Bears are the lowest you need to go, and I think I'm all set. I think that's the way I'm gonna go this week. Hopefully it goes better than last week. Certainly do have to reassess the Vikings and Broncos at this stage in the game. As always, if you like what we're doing here, give us a like and subscribe. If you want to read this article, head to dailyfantasycafe.com. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.